the fellowship of God and not be obedient to him. I didn't say it's just impossible. I said it is divinely impossible. It is impossible for God to embrace your fellowship with his fellowship when you're not obedient to him. In Titus chapter 1 and verse 2, Hebrews chapter 6 and verse 18, both of those verses help us to understand that it is impossible for God to lie. So God must have said something regarding the fellowship that make it divinely impossible. Look at verse 7. If we walk in the light as he is the light, we have fellowship one with another. Now God himself said that. So what you saying, God? God, as long as you're walking in the light, because I am the light, you and I have fellowship. So it is divinely impossible for me to be in fellowship with God and be disobedient to him. Every time I forsake the assembly, I'm out of fellowship with God. Every time I speak evil of my brother and sister, I'm out of fellowship with God. In God, there is no darkness at all. And darkness symbolizes unrighteousness. Darkness symbolizes evilness. Darkness symbolizes sin. Light is a symbol of purity. It's a symbol of righteousness. It's symbolic of having the knowledge of God. Anytime I do something that is out of order with God, that is not in conjunction with the Word of God, I'm not in the light. I am under the light, and God and I are not in fellowship. I bet y'all didn't know that. When you make a choice that I'm going to stay home and not go to church, if you just put yourself out of fellowship with God. When you make a choice to not treat your brother and sister the way God have treated you, you made a choice to be out of fellowship with God. When you make a choice to come into the services of God and not worship God in spirit and in truth, you just got yourself out of fellowship with God. Don't get upset with me. God was the one that determined the fellowship. God is the one that was who made it clear that the only way that you can have my fellowship is you have to be in the light. If you're not in the light because I'm the light, you and I don't have anything in common. We have no communion with one another. That's why I think Paul says very clearly that he that eateth and drinketh unworthily eateth and drinketh damnation to himself, not discerning the Lord's body. Why? Because when we take communion, and that's not specifically what the word communion here in terms of fellowship, but when we take communion, this puts us in a fellowship relationship with God, because we are remembering what Jesus done for us on that cruel cross of Calvary, what his Father done when he sent his Son to die that cruel death, and when we eat that bread and drink that blood, we are saying to the Father, I am committed to the sacrifice of the Lamb, that through his blood I might have life, hope, and everlasting. Yes. And God is saying, well, that's okay. Unfortunately, you and I are not in fellowship. Fellowship with God involves three things. It involves unity. You cannot be in fellowship with God divided. No one. Because in God there is no darkness at all. No congregation can be in fellowship with God divided from other congregations of the Lord's church. No preacher can be in fellowship with God divided from other preachers of the gospel. No member can be in fellowship with God if they are divided amongst themselves. So we need to be careful about who we want to associate and align ourselves with, because I'd rather be in fellowship with God, even if it means I have to accept your fellowship, Brother G, even though I don't like it. Because I need the fellowship of God to get me to heaven. And therefore I must embrace your fellowship in order to maintain it. Paul in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 3, Paul said, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body, one Spirit, even as you are called in one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, and one baptism, one God, the Father of all, who is above all, and through all, and in you all. I'm talking about perfect unity. See, the fellowship with God involves being united. It involves being one. In Colossians 3:14, Paul said, and above all these things, put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness. It not only involves unity, but it involves suffering. In order for us to have fellowship with God, we got to suffer, like Jesus suffered. In order for us to have fellowship with God, we got to go through some trials, just like Jesus went through some